Tech-heavy Nasdaq crossing the 20,000 mark. First time that's ever happened, and it was quite something for those of us who remember Nasdaq 5,000 before the dot-com bubble burst years ago. Doug Flynn's here, Flynn Zito Capital Management. The reason I bring that up, we have a chart on my tablet here that telestrator that could bring up of the Nasdaq over the years, going back 30 years, right? So it's interesting because when that happened, I do remember covering it early in my career. It was probably the midpoint of your career or thereabouts. But when it was March 2000, right, which is right in here. When it hit 5,000. It was a huge deal at the time.
Sure.
But then it took like 15 years to get back to 5,000. And now to see it go up like this at the end to get to 20,000. What do you say?
Yeah, it's great. I mean, I'm dating myself, but I remember it below 1,000.
So you are dating yourself. Well, that's really dating yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, and it went above that, and then it crashed during early 2000s.
Pets.com and all that was back after that. But
exactly.
The 5,000 was a big deal at the time.
Was a huge deal, and so obviously, like same thing with the Dow and the other indicators. Each extra 1,000 is a smaller percentage as you move up, but it does give you an idea of how the progression has gone. And in all of these, none of this includes dividends, by the way. These are just price returns, and not that there's a lot of dividends on the Nasdaq relative to the Dow, but it's important to note that growth doesn't even include the advancement of that, which some of those companies do begin to pay dividends as they grow. So it's a great milestone, no question, that the advancement of that is at a higher and faster percentage than the Dow. It could catch it one day.
The advancement of the Nasdaq today is interesting because I guess the bet there is we had inflation data out this morning, and the headline for the inflation data is it is stubborn. Getting rid of inflation is tough, right? But from the stock market's point of view, I guess they're betting that the Fed will be cutting rates here. This is the monthly inflation rate. We had a 2.7 rate of inflation
Definitely.
that came in today.
Yeah, the Nasdaq moved a bit more. Basically, the tech companies moved a bit more today than the stocks in the Dow, primarily because it was as expected. There wasn't anything out of the ordinary to the negative today. So, no bad news equals good news. And so that is why the Nasdaq moved a little bit more. But there is no doubt that the inflation numbers that came out are very stubborn. If you look at it on a monthly basis, the core number that the Fed really looks at has remained at 0.3 on a monthly basis for 4 months in a row. And so what that means is that if you extrapolate that out for a full 12 months, that rate of inflation is higher than the current annualized rate that we're all quoting here. And so that's the concern, is that you could actually see it pick back up a little bit. And so while we all think the Fed's going to cut next week, I think the market says 95 to 98% they're going to cut. The one after that is really at issue. Do we need it? If the economy is okay, you may not need to cut much further, if at all.
It's a very interesting time, especially one administration to the other, too, in the middle of all of this. Final point here before the closing bell. Let's talk about this big merger that got blocked. So there were these two big supermarket chains, Albertsons and Kroger's, who wanted to merge. But then you have the Biden administration on its way out, the FTC chair named Lina Khan, who's controversial in some sectors of some quarters of the financial world. They're stepping in here, and Albertson now abandoning the Kroger's deal. So I think the timing is really interesting, right? Because Trump's coming in with his new FTC person.
That's right.
A couple of people, really. And I wonder if you'll see stuff like this go through in the future.
It's likely that you will see more stuff go through. This administration, as we've spoken about, has really been one of the harshest ones on mergers and acquisitions. And so that's one of the things that the market likes, is that maybe there'll be some more mergers and acquisitions. And in this one, obviously the government's take is always it's going to create higher prices for consumers, and consumers are going to lose. But a real quick math is like Walmart is actually gets the numbers 22% of all the grocery sales in the United States are Walmart. And the combined these two companies, Kroger and Albertson, would have gotten up to 13%. So, I get that in some areas you might have some competition die. The companies are saying in order for us to compete with Walmart and
you got to be bigger. You have to have more scale. But they didn't want it. Not on this administration anyway.
Exactly.
Interesting again to see what happens in the future. Thank you, Doug. As always, 4 o'clock in New York.